Hello, Leapers. I'm Chris, and I'm here with Albie and Matt, and we are thrilled to welcome Dean Georgaris back to the podcast. Dean, how you doing?
I'm doing good. It's good to be back talking to all of you.
So for those out there who don't know, Dean is the executive producer of Quantum Leap, and he is also a writer and basically runs the show over there. So we got the inside track when it comes to Quantum Leap. And boy, oh boy, Dean, I got a lot of questions. So season 2, huh? I mean,
I can answer some of them. I promise you by the end of the season, they'll all be answered. And stuff that you didn't even realize was being asked will be answered. We're all very satisfied about the full season.
Awesome. Well, let's start at the beginning of the season, because one thing that we've been remarking on the podcast since this has taken too long is the marked change in the feel of the show this season, sort of in the attitude of the show this season, and the way you've pivoted away from season 1 to create a whole new feel for Quantum Leap. So can you tell us a little bit about when you were wrapping up season 1 after you got through Judgment Day, like when you were breaking season 2, what kinds of new considerations were you guys taking into account when crafting the story?
I think as Martin has said before, Martin and I came on basically very early in the filming of season 1, but they'd already sort of established that the present day story was going to be a mystery. I think a very, very good choice for a first season. Why does Ben leap and his beloved is trying to get him home? I think, and then that was, so if you think about it, it's a bit of a mystery story, right? And with a little bit of a thriller thrown in. And when we got to the end of season 1, Martin and I started talking about what we would do, what would you do differently, right? Not because you necessarily weren't happy with what you did, but it's more like, hey, we get another shot. And this is a show that can kind of, I don't say it can reinvent itself, but I do think the engine that is Quantum Leap, the leaping, does allow for a lot of different kinds of stories. I think, as I've said to you before, like there can be a romantic season, there can be a thriller season, there can be all sorts of seasons. And that, coupled with the fact that we tell stories in the present with modern characters in the present, as opposed to the original show, Martin and I both had a longing to tell emotional stories for our present day characters, as opposed to stories on a mystery axis about what has Ben doing and why. And, we wanted to create a season where, like, for example, in Nomads, the audience knows Addison's got something else on her mind, and the audience knows what it is. And in fact, Addison doesn't even have to talk about it with Ben that episode. It's not, the episode has a lot going on, but the audience knows where Addison's coming from. The audience knows where Ben's coming from. And so I guess in a way, what I'm trying to say is, you think of some of these great television dramas where people's jobs and their emotional livelihood is the focus of storytelling. Like, for example, Grey's Anatomy. The example of a show where it would be strange to watch it and not know how these characters felt about life and each other. We really wanted to try to tell a season on that axis, if you will, but not just because of what it does for the present, but also because we wanted to explore, and we want to explore, what would it mean to actually be a leaper? Like, what is your living experience? You don't make new friends, not anything permanent. I mean, it is the most ephemeral existence imaginable. And how can we start to dramatize that? How can we start to ask questions like, what would love be like for a time travel? How can, so we wanted to ask these big emotional questions. And that was why Martin said, what if we do a time jump? And they all thought Ben was dead. And that was That was one of those aha moments when he said it. I was so excited. I kept thinking, I was like, boy, I don't know if I ever would have thought of that, but I'm so glad he said it.
Well, that effectively allowed you to clean the slate because so much time had passed for the characters, and even though Ben, for him it was just one leap, but you did such a remarkable job, and this has taken too long, of leaving him alone for the entire leap, because it was almost like a soft reboot for Ben. He had to learn how to, just trust in his gut and do things the way he thought they should be done, even though, he's used to help from Addison. And then everything that unfolds for the season. So I guess what I'd like to know is, when you were figuring out the character journeys for your main cast this season, what were the things specifically that you wanted to highlight and maybe tweak, not just on the leaping aspect, but the back of the project aspect, because that has a much different feel this season too, even though they're still in the cave, as I know the cast likes to call it. It's a much different dynamic going on there.
I think what we wanted to do, well, first of all, what we wanted to do was introduce the kind of stakes that, emotional stakes for all the characters, right? Like we wanted, they lost him once and thought he was dead. That's now happened to them, and frankly, it's a sort of Damocles that's hanging over every episode. Like, it's a sort of unspoken, but it's there. We loved the idea that we would get to tell the stories of what happened to these people. I'll put it to you this way, like, what happens when you read the title card, Sam Beckett never made it home? Like, what happens for the next 2 or 3 years? If you're, what does that actually feel like? We knew we would allow us to we'd get to know the personal lives of these characters in the present more. But I think also, look, our stories, besides a leap story, which is always the most important thing, our story is a love story, and there's nothing better than obstacles in a love story. And then also, what we wanted to do this year that we couldn't do last year, really, was try to expand what we as an audience think about when we tune into an episode of Quantum Leap. You know what I mean? Like, and what I mean by that is, so because we aren't just the whole episode is we're in Sam's shoes, and we're not spending 44 minutes or 42 minutes as Sam. We're spending 28 minutes, let's say, as Ben. How can we ask questions like, what is the engine that actually makes Leap work? How can we ask questions like, what does it feel like to love or to lose someone? How can we ask these emotional questions? And that was, as I think I said before, like, that was the goal of the season. That felt more exciting to all of us. And, look, I'm a geek. I'm a nerd. I know you had Marguerite on the other week. Like, we're sort of equally geeky in different ways. But, give me the Blade Runners of the world, and I'm always so amazed and fascinated by the things of, like, oh, yeah, we just assume love between us and a replicant. Oh, my God, that's so mind-blowing. But I hadn't thought about, well, what about love between a replicant and a pure AI? Like expanding how universe was I think a goal of ours this season, because it also felt like a responsibility. Like, Deborah's original show has done such a great job, and its legacy has lasted as long as it has. And I think we've probably all been doing that in our imaginations. We've all been sort of walking around thinking about, like, what does this mean and how would it work? And so we just wanted to start to put that on screen for everybody.
I'm really intrigued because you mentioned about the fact that you don't have the full 45 minutes, 44 minutes for the Leap portion. And we know that one of the challenges in the first season was having all these different interesting main characters vying for attention, and the Leap plot and the future plot. Were you conscious of any kind of risk expanding an already big ensemble cast in order to tell the story? And how have you dealt with that as the seasons progressed?
I think we were definitely conscious that coming back and having Addison have moved on after thinking Ben was dead was a giant risk. Like, it's a giant ask of our audience. We knew that even though we were adding two characters I think ultimately are in a lot of ways serving almost parallel purposes with each other. We knew that there was actually going to be more time to tell, like I said, the other stories, because, we didn't have to service the 4 or 5 minutes of, not that I don't want to say I didn't like it. Like I remember when we were talking about the whole slingshotting through time, the way we slingshot through space. So I loved all of that in season 1. But, every minute you're doing that's not a minute where people can be talking about something that all of us at home might actually have wrestled with or could recognize or have been through. And so that was really exciting. Like, it was just exciting to take something as fantastical, if you will, as Quantum Leap, right? Something sort of this is cutting edge, this is pushing such a big idea. And then it's like, okay, well, now let's take what it means to be in love, what it means to be a good friend, what it means to be loyal. And let's drop that in this big world. And to me, when science fiction is at its best, it's doing that. I know Margarita mentioned Blade Runner 2049 when she was on. Like, I loved that film. I know for some people it's not their taste, but I loved it because it's just filled with big questions.
Well, one big question I have, I know that it seemed to me in season 1, the show steadfastly stayed away from questions of faith and higher power and what we call GTFW on our show, God, time, fate, whatever. And then we had that bombshell from Tom saying, what if sacrifice is the engine of leaping? And to me, that brings us back to that spiritual element, somewhat like sacrifice to who? Sacrifice to what? In service of what? Power. I feel like this season you've been leaning a little bit more into that aspect of the Legacy series. Is that something we can expect to see more of? Is that a very conscious choice on your part?
It's absolutely. I think one of the things we're trying to do is have our characters start to, very naturally, our characters are searching for meaning now. Why am I doing this? Like, Ben had a purpose, a very finite purpose in his mind. He thought he was going to leap, save Addison, go home and have a hamburger, right? But now all sorts, if we think about it, why is the universe have them lose him for 3 years? Why does the universe have him crossing with Hannah? Why does the universe have Addison find a possible wedding ring? The same episode, she's realizing that, wow, like, Ben really has no chance at love with me from his end, but this woman sure seems to care about him. Like, the whole idea is our characters are asking those big questions. Our characters are getting frustrated at times with the universe. I think Addison in particular, both Addison and Ben in particular, are really going through, it's a real trial of faith at times. Because, and as you'll see, we're going to continue to ask this question all the way to the finale of season 2, and then we're going to hopefully really give you some satisfying answers that reaffirm a sense of a benevolent guiding force, as Magic said in season 1, that sort of Martin Luther King quote. We absolutely want to be asking the why. Like, what's going on here? Like, why is he leaping? What's making it happen? And that scene you mentioned with Tom, it's interesting. That was actually a case, that was episode 4. And it was a case of the episode had been written and we were sort of going through it as a room, and it felt like we were missing something. And it felt like specifically we were missing a Tom scene but more than that, it felt like we were missing asking a question, like we were missing sort of acknowledging that in this episode, our characters are sort of realizing maybe they're not going to work together. There wasn't a big question being asked. And so that was actually the genesis of that. Like, I just jotted that scene down on like a napkin, just like, and the whole idea was, what if what if we're not supposed to bring Sam home? Like, just what if he's out there? What if that card is, and by the way, it's what Deborah says to me, that is an optimistic card. It is not a sad end. That is a happy end. And so again, I love my long answers, but the whole idea is all we want to do this season is be asking, why is this happening to me? And how do I be a human being while it's happening to me? I mean, I almost think that's what this season is.
I think we've seen Ben go through that evolution remarkably well in a very short time. Viewing wise, when it started out in the Closure Encounters, when he tells Addison, now I'm stuck in this life, whatever this life is. And here in Nomads, he seems to really actually be leaning into it and kind of relishing a lot of the aspects of it now, because he's accepted that maybe he's in this for the long haul. So he's adjusted his view on it. So I think you guys have done a terrific job of that.
Great. I mean, look, that's life, right? I mean, we don't dictate all the circumstances of our lives. We want to, but we all get big curveballs. We all have profound disappointments. I would argue Ben not getting home at the end of season 1 was a profound disappointment for Ben. And then we just we were like, let's add some more disappointments on there. And at a certain point, there's that great quote from Shawshank Redemption, get busy living or get busy dying. Like, I remember when I was working on this episode, I was like, get busy leaping or get busy dying. I mean, that's really what Ben, as a human being, has to start to do.
When you're getting ideas for a season, what is the process like in the room, in your head, of like the big beats and like, do you know immediately where you want it to finish? And are you just trying to figure out how to get there, or do you work your ways backwards? And how does that work?
We spend a few weeks basically. So, to give you the sort of the specifics. So the first idea that stuck was Martin saying, what if we did a 3-year time leap? Like the minute he said that, and it was just he and I at that point talking, but we both committed 100% to that. And then immediately after that, that relieved a huge pressure, which was the notion of keeping Addison and Ben as an intact couple. It terrified me as a writer, because I just felt like I was going to be asking the audience and the actors to do the same thing basically every week, variations on it. So first we did time leap. That immediately led to Addison's got someone new. And very quickly also led to the idea of Hannah, who, now that, we're through 8 episodes, think, it's safe to say is a chance, if nothing else, to explore, like I said, what would it be like to be how do you leave an impact as Ben Song when you're a leaper, not as the person you've leapt into and fixed their lives. Like, what are Ben Song's footprints in the sands of time? And like, here's at least potentially one. Here's a woman who he's going to change her life. She's going to know it was a guy named Ben Song, right? Drew Lindo did that so beautifully in 206, which the only thing she wants to know is his name. So Hannah came really quick, and Hannah's kind of was my jam. Like, I was all in on the Hannah story. It's my kind of story. And so pretty quickly we knew, okay, more or less the pace of what we want to do with Hannah, more or less the pace of what we want to do with Tom and Addison. So, and I would say a little more, but I'll save it for our 213 show, and I promise I will come back after that one. And then, so basically you spend a week or two doing that. And then you're into breaking individual episodes and putting in the micro steps and seeing if your pacing guesses were right. So for example, Martin felt strongly, and I agreed with him, that we should do all of 201 without anyone but Ben. And we were terrified because the network and studio, first of all, we were terrified they were just going to say no to the concepts of season 2 because it was a change, but they were supportive. And their only note was, we feel like if there's no presence of the team in the first episode of season 2, it's a little disingenuous because you are going to keep telling their stories, and that's what led to the memories. So that's an example of where, the good process of collaboration between writers and network and studio. So we knew 2 was going to end with Addison. I knew right away it was going to be, she doesn't need to tell him because he's going to take a look at her. No. And then we'd also know, and one of our beliefs as a writer's room is we're not gonna linger in melodrama or schmaltz. Like our characters are sophisticated, worldly grown-ups. They're not teenagers. No offense to teenagers. They're going to move through emotions relatively quickly. So, sorry, again, long answer. But so we kind of knew by 4 we wanted the I hate you too to be over. And then we knew by the mid-season finale that we wanted them to have found a new footing and really, I think, be accepting for the first time, the universe, which I'm hoping is benevolent here, sure seems to be guiding us in a different path than we expected. Like, it's thrown Hannah in his way 3 times, and clearly she cares for him. It's made me find a ring. Like, if if the old, which is the universe sending you signs, just when you think the universe is sending you those signs, all of a sudden you've got a possibility that you can bring Ben back. So again, a chance to question the universe, because while we always want to be optimistic in Quantum Leap, I think it's important to allow our characters to doubt too, to doubt the benevolence of what's happening to them. Like in the original series, they got to able to do that with things like Lothos. You had actual negative forces out there. In our case, I think we're being a little bit more almost biblical in its, these trials that the universe seems to be putting in front of you don't have sort of simple, clear explanations. But, I was talking to Caitlin the other day, and I was saying, boy, we've really beat up Addison this season. We've obviously put Ben through the ringer, but we've really put Addison through the ringer, because every time she thinks she can set her feet in something, we pull the rug out from under her.
I love the beats in Nomad. Some of the moments in Nomad, especially with Caitlin, and the when she's realizing that there's love between Hannah and Ben, and almost finally realizing again what she's lost, because when they got Ben back, she had an opportunity to be with him again, because it was one day for Ben, but she didn't. But can you tell me a little bit about when you're writing the script? Is that all communicated in the script, or is that in conversations with directors and Caitlin and stuff like that?
No, that's a great question. I never even thought about it that way. The hope is, so you don't write it specifically in description. Hey, I'm hoping this, right? You will write things in the script, and sometimes that a character is looking at someone feeling a certain way, you'll sort of put little hints in. But most of the time, what you're hoping is that the writing and the imagination of the people reading it will go, oh, yes, this is happening. Now, I say that sort of hopefully because there's always a risk to it. And I think in some ways we took a lot of risks in 208. I'm glad to hear that at least some of them were working, because we were covering a lot of emotional ground fairly quickly. And we were doing it in the penumbra of this exotic location and this idea that we all have these moments in life where for 24 hours or 72 hours, it seems like we're in our own little mini universe. We're in our own world. And that's where I think all of our characters were. And so the hope is that the directors and the actors understand it. But then before you go to film, you actually have what's called a tone meeting, which is where you go through the script with the director. And I do kind of a version of what we're doing right now, except with the script in front of me. And I'll say, so in this scene, what's happening is this, and what's great is this. And because, we had Chris Grismer on this, who's our producing director. He knows all the storylines, but we are often working with people who are just coming in for the week. So they may not know the function of all these things. So you go through every scene and you talk what it's supposed to do, what's most important, and why. And you do that, one, to make sure you're all on the same page, no pun intended. Two, so that the director knows what to do if the day is going sideways, or, like they're out there on set. If they know the intention of the scene and what's most important, if they have to improvise, they can, which, because I wasn't on the set, we were on strike at this point. So that's again, another one of my classic long answers to your question. It's in the script, and then it's in meetings right before you shoot the episode.
If I can just follow up on that collaborative process, it's something I think we've asked the writers, but having you would give us more of a unique, overview. I mean, so Derek and Drew and Margarita, and they want to write their story. They want to do the Salem. They want to do the spy thriller. They want to do this. So they're pitching their stories, and you say, "Great, let's run with that one. Let's run with that one." And then do you go up to Margarita and say, "Okay, in the middle of this, you also have to incorporate this element of the overarching story," or do you go to like Benjamin and Derek and say, "You have to put this part in," or
Yeah.
How does that work?
No, it's a great question. So, the room all knows the basic roadmap and all knows, let's say, like, these are going to be the 5 or 6 or 2 or 3 Hannah episodes. These are going to be, so they'll know those big touchstones. Then we order the episodes and we try to do it so that no 2 leaps in a row feel similar. We try to marry, we keep in mind who's free when. When a writer is assigned a script, it takes them roughly between 2 to 3 weeks to write it, then 2 to 3 weeks until that shoots of preparation. They're on the set for 2 weeks. And then, so in other words, it's a 6 or 7 week, let's say, I don't think my math was right, commitment where they're out of the room, right? Like they'll be in communication with us, but they're out of the room. So we can't say, okay, Ben and Derek are going to do episode 4, and then they're going to do episode 6, because those were both their ideas. It's like, as I think Margarita mentioned, like Leap, Die, Repeat was their idea. But they were doing I forget what we ended up calling the hospital episode, but they were
Paging Dr. Song.
Yeah, they were doing Paging Dr. Song. So they very graciously were cool about the fact that to let Margarita do it. And then when we're breaking the actual episode, which we do on this show as a room, putting in the note cards. Okay, the opening image is going to be this. So in this case, for me, it was like, we're going to open. I sort of did the same thing I did in the Battleship episode. I wanted to open with where the heck am I? Whoa. I got the easy openings to write. But you put the cards and we all go over them as a room. And then we all decide this is working, this isn't working. Hey, one of the things, I don't know if it would make the season better or not, but one of the things that when I was writing 8, I found myself thinking was, I kind of wish I had seen this Addison and Tom opening scene earlier in the season. Because, and now maybe I'm wrong. And I should say, I had the thought. I didn't really go with it. But, we had not seen Addison and Tom as a couple doing a coupley thing until episode 8. Some part of me thinks, oh, maybe that was too late. On the other hand, when I watch the season, I go, oh, that's nice. But again, just that's an example of you go through the note cards, you make sure they're working, and then you stop and you look at the big board and you go, oh, wait a minute. If we want to reach that goal and we're only at this episode, we're going to have to stretch, or we're going to have to crush, or we have to rethink it. And there were certainly things that we rethought or we, adjusted. So, and then we all know that it's possible for whatever reason, someone might help you rewrite a scene, or will write the same character all through the season to make sure the voices are more consistent. So it's a collaborative process, but we also, Martin and I, try to empower each writer so that really when you see their name on an episode, you're seeing their work. It's not like they just contribute a little bit. They're not like little robots somewhere. Like it's them producing it. It's them writing it, and I think you start to almost get a feel for what each writer likes to do. Like after, certainly like, again, because I saw Margarita last week, like I can tell a Margarita episode whenever I see one. I'm like, that's a Margarita.
I'm interested because you mentioned about the collaboration with Chris and the strike. Now, obviously, you would have had to have stepped back from 208 much earlier than in 114. Did you come back after the strike and get back involved in the episode, or was it actually no? Believe it or not.
I mean, I did something similar to what Margarita did, where I tried to give Chris, and again, I had the advantage of it being Chris. Mm-hmm. So there's, we talk every day, but I tried to I gave him alternate lines for certain scenes if, because you're thinking like a producer, you're like, what if they get over to Egypt and they can't film that? Like, or what if the actor or actress, I gave him alts he could try. I gave him a sort of, nice. I tried to give him what it would be like for me to be there to sort of support him. And for the most part, I mean, they did a great job. It's funny. Like, there's only like one line in the whole thing where I'm like, no, it's meant to be a different line. But it was, it's nerve wracking. I mean, our post team edited them. I mean, Martin and I, the Writers Guild was very specific about what it viewed as contributions and what it didn't. And even if sometimes it didn't necessarily, it didn't matter whether I thought she is giving notes on a cut. Is that writing? The Guild was very clear. It's like, that's a writing contribution. So, we were lucky. In a way, we were lucky that it was our 24th or 26th contiguous episode. So we weren't handing the stuff off to people who didn't really have a good sense of what the show was.
About Nomad, how does one get a network television show to go on location in Egypt? That seems like a big ask, and you got it.
So Martin, when he was making the show Blind Spot, started working with a company called Magic Key, and what they do is they basically help you film internationally. They have local crews. They are, they have local organizations. They know the places, right? So we knew after episode 8, it was going to be our mid-season finale. We knew, strike or no strike, we were shutting down because we had done so many episodes in a row. So we were taking a hiatus. So Martin said, that's the one where you can shoot abroad, because what you do is the days shooting abroad are the final days that you shoot, right? Because you burn 2 days of travel in each direction. It's highly inefficient to try to shoot internationally anywhere, but at the very end of your shoot. Because think of it this way, every day that you're filming your show, you're paying people, whether those people are working or not. So in our case, you don't want to pay people and then go away to Paris for 2 weeks and make an episode in Paris because you're paying basically double. You're paying twice for 2, and the studio just says no. So we knew we would do it at the mid-season finale, and I started thinking of sort of more classic European capitals like Rome or Paris, and Martin was like, no, like they can look like America. People might think we're on a back lot. He said, we need to go somewhere where the audience jaw drops and they can't believe that you're there. And Magic Key sent us a list of, places to film, and Egypt was on there. And so that was Egypt picked itself, but it made us look smart because it was the perfect setting for sort of Casablanca, English patient-y-esque story, right? It felt like for the story we tell, 60s Cairo, sort of a sexy world, was perfect. So we look really clever. But that's the magic of it. It's actually that's how you do it.
Well, you guys going to Egypt is indicative of another trend that we've been seeing this season, in the sense that the leaps just seem to be bigger, bolder, more adventurous. Can you tell us about sort of threading that needle and doing stuff that is different from, say, the Legacy series, but still trying to keep the core of what makes Quantum Leap Quantum Leap?
Yeah, that's another great question. It's interesting. I don't think we were conscious of the fact that the leaps are bigger and bolder. I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm just saying, that wasn't a mandate. We didn't go, they got to be bigger. They got to be bigger. I think maybe, we had grown in confidence as a room. I think also, again, you would be surprised how freeing it was to know we didn't have to serve as a plot mystery for that stretch, right? That meant, because the HQ stories were going to be emotionally tied to the leap, what it also means is it frankly feels like you're getting 42 to 44 minutes of leap as opposed to 28 minutes of leap and 10 minutes of let's solve the code. And we just, I guess we took bigger swings when I think about it. Like it was a fun list. Let's do a UFO. Let's do the guys had wanted to do the LA riots from season 1. I thought that was classic Quantum Leap story. But yeah, I would say the goal wasn't to be bigger, but the goal was certainly to be more emotional and more as much coherence as possible between present, I don't say present day, but HQ and Leap. And we had coherence in season 1 sometimes, and I think those seem to be the episodes people like the most. A lot of times the coherence, what I mean by that is they were solving a mystery that was like paying off or was affecting the leap. Like in the battleship, it was like, Magic was getting information. We were piecing it together. But this year I think it just feels bigger. Or maybe, I don't know. Maybe they are bigger.
Well, it could be what you're saying, because the stories do seem a little bit more cohesive. So
Yeah.
that's probably lending some weight to that.
I'm interested. You say you've sort of shied away almost from a mystery box that needs a little bit of unpacking every week. And you've just left us with this, here's a document that is going to lead into what sounds like potentially a 5-episode mystery box. Is that a fair expectation? Or what can we look forward to over what's coming up early next year?
Yeah, how can I say this in a non-spoilery way? Good answer. So, for sure, it's a bit of a mystery box. It's actually, I think you will get to the end of 13 and you'll see, oh my goodness, like that was playing out for longer than I thought, in ways I didn't expect. But we are going to there is a bit more of a puzzle now. There is are we going to figure out, are we bringing Bet home? What is this DARPA thing? What is it a fragment of? Where did it come from? We are going to get a little bit more of that. I mean, we're going to get that. That's part of the story. But it's, and you'll get to know, we've set up that Ian obtained a chip from someone. You will meet that someone. Like all the threads, the emotional and the story threads all will come together. But it's not over the course of the season. It's a portion of the season as opposed to the only thing of the season.
Yeah.
I think you threaded that needle pretty well.
Thanks.
I mean, just in practical terms, last week before Nomads, we got to see Ben leap back, to 1692, as far back as any leap has ever gone. Do you guys have any kind of hard limit on how far back you're going to go, or is it just all story based? And if you think you can,
Dinosaurs.
Yeah, dinosaurs. That's what we're thinking.
Just one episode. That's all.
No, it's again, another great question, a fair question. We've never sat as a room and drawn a line through a date in history and said, no further than this. I do think there's a line past which it goes from, oh, I'm going to learn something about life that relates to today, to this is a gimmick. Like I love the idea of Ben with dinosaurs, but there's no human story to really tell there.
Yeah,
so
he's got to be able to leap into somebody, right?
so
That's a good point.
I'm not afraid to go back further than we have, but I don't want the stories to ever stop being human stories that at least have a present day thread, that ties somehow to what we're going through now.
Dinosaurs is one thing, but I really enjoyed in One Night in Koreatown, where Ray got to use his Korean. And I was thinking it would be amazing to see an episode totally in Korean, which would be in Ben's skill set, obviously. And is there any thought of doing different episodes like that down the line?
Well, I'll say this. We like to push the network and how much they'll, I don't say they'll let us do that makes it sound like they're tough parents, but they know their audience. They know things like subtitles are hard on television audiences. So when you just have to give it a little more thought when we get to do it. But I think in success, we're already setting up for a season 3, knock on wood, where we're going to be pushing, we're already going to be pushing some new limits. So I don't rule anything out of the table as long as it's producible. In a lot of ways, I think, and again, I know Margarita mentioned this, but the biggest limiter is the reality of how much time and money you have to make an episode of Quantum Leap. That is and that's it's wonderful to have a limitation, because otherwise, the blank page is totally blank page is terrifying. But pretty much, if it can be done in a reasonable amount of time and in a reasonable budget, our writers' room and Martin and I and our production team are going to try it. Or we're going to try to pull it. We already tried to pull off some crazy stuff, including, frankly, going to Cairo. That was if that footage hadn't worked, it was not going to be as nearly interesting and looking episode if we had to now then go refilm it, fake it. Besides the fact that we'd be destroying our budget, the audience would just be like, "Oh, the CG pyramids, yay!"
One question that I do have is that, going back to the GTFW thing and maybe leaning into some of the more spiritual aspects of the Legacy series, are there other threads from the series that are, on your mind when you're crafting how this show goes forward, things that you might want to pick up or at least allude to give more connective tissue? Or is that ever even a concern?
Well, we're always looking for it. I wish I could answer, because there's one connective thread that I don't think the Twitter, X, or whatever, I don't really monitor social media, but there's a tie to the original series that I haven't seen people make yet in this season's story. But, we're always looking for those opportunities. And by the end of the season, you will have one explicitly stated on screen. But yeah, mostly what we're trying to do is do the things that they couldn't do because they didn't have an Addison in a team. Like it's, sometimes, look, I love the original so much. And there are times like when we were filming the first episode, we were like, boy, it's fun. Like just all Leap, all Ben all the time. And it is. But, the rest of our cast that's not a hindrance. That's an opportunity. Right. And so I think to your point of asking these bigger spiritual questions, like, we want to put them all, they've all made interesting choices this year. I mean, we haven't really talked about it on the screen yet, but we will be talking more about, the fact that Ian refused to give up. And how does obviously Ian's in some sort of trouble for refusing to give up, but there's a flip side to that coin, which is that's incredibly heroic. There's obviously what Magic has gone through. There's what Addison is going through present tense with, I mean, God bless her that she doesn't just walk out of that place and say, I'm done. Like, I can't put myself through this anymore. Ben doesn't have a choice, literally. She does. And she keeps showing up for him, for all the people who are disappointed that maybe she didn't just leave the light on forever and refuse to accept that he was gone. Mm-hmm. Like, she came back to work the day she found out.
So, Dean, I cannot wait. I mean, we are so super stoked as a podcast because about an hour before we spoke to you, we spoke to the entire main cast, and they were alluding to like big stuff to come in the back five, and now you're giving us
Mason
even more.
told us everything.
Everything. Yeah.
Mason somehow got everything out of Martin and I. Like when we went back into production, Mason asked one question, and I found myself telling them the entire rest of the season. I don't think I've told Ray or Caitlin that. Oh, I should. Mason has that power.
Yeah. So, Matt, here's a special note. Let's lean on Mason a little bit, see what they have to say. Dean, you have been generous with your time. You've given us so much to think about. We are thrilled to have you back here on the Quantum Leap podcast. Thank you so much for everything you've done for our favorite series and for being so open and receptive to us and to the fans. We really appreciate it.
Thank you all so much. And like I said, I'm excited to come back, hopefully pretty soon, and talk about it. Give you all a little time to digest it, and then we can talk about it as a whole.
Awesome. We can't wait for that.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.